Most people don't feel exhausted because life is hard. They feel exhausted because they're trying to keep up with versions of themselves that were never real to begin with. Sociologist Charles Horton Cooley once said that we don't just live our lives, we live inside how we imagine others see us. And that changes everything. Because what you call insecurity might not be a flaw in you at all. It might be the result of constantly measuring yourself through distorted reflections. Think about it. How much of your confidence is actually yours, and how much of it is shaped by comparison, approval, or silent judgment? Most people aren't struggling to become better. They're struggling to keep up with a version of themselves that only exists in other people's minds. And the more you try to fix that version, the more disconnected you feel from who you actually are. In this video, we're going to break down 5 hidden forces that quietly shape how you see yourself, and why letting go of them might change more than anything you've tried so far. If any part of you feels like you've been trying to catch up to your own life, you're not alone. Let's look at what's really going on. There are people who spend 10 or 15 years trying to repair something that was never fully theirs in the first place. Not their character, not their values, not even their real life, just their image in someone else's head. Charles Horton Cooley wrote about this back in 1902, and even now, more than a century later, it still explains so much of the quiet pain people carry. He said we often come to know ourselves through the way we imagine other people see us. That sounds simple. It isn't. Because once that starts, you are no longer living only one life. You are living your actual life. And then you are living in your guess about how that life looks from the outside. And that guess can become a prison. You speak less in a meeting at work in Chicago, and one person thinks you are thoughtful. Another thinks you are insecure. You say no to a last-minute invitation, and one friend respects it, while another decides you have changed. You post less on Instagram, and someone assumes you are finally at peace. Someone else assumes you are struggling. Same person, same action, completely different verdict. That matters more than most people realize. Because after a while, many people stop asking, "Who am I really becoming?" and start asking, "How am I coming across?" You can hear it in small daily habits. The extra text rewritten 3 times. The apology added when it was not needed. The polished LinkedIn update that sounds almost right, but not quite like you. The smile in a room where you already feel the distance. This is where the exhaustion begins. Not because you are fake, because you are trying to manage too many versions of yourself at once. The version your family still expects, the version your boss responds to, the version strangers reward online, the version you think sounds safe. Irving Goffman, writing in 1959, noticed something similar. He described ordinary life as a place where people are constantly managing how they are seen. You can watch it happen anywhere in the United States today. In a Dallas office, someone lowers their voice to sound more professional. On TikTok, a 23-year-old turns heartbreak into confidence because sadness does not travel as well. On Hinge, people trim themselves down to prompts that feel witty, calm, and easy to choose. It starts to feel normal. But normal does not mean harmless. Because the longer you live in reaction to imagined judgment, the harder it becomes to feel the weight of your own life from the inside. You start confusing reputation with character, approval with closeness, attention with truth. And once that happens, even good moments lose their peace.
A compliment feels nice, but only for a minute. A post does well, but now you have to keep that version going. A date goes well, but you leave wondering which part of you they actually liked. That is a lonely way to live. and it is more common than people say. A 2023 Pew Research Center report found that large majorities of American teens use YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat regularly. Even if you are not a teenager anymore, the air is the same. The pressure is the same. Visibility moves fast. Judgment moves faster. In a country where personal brand became normal language somewhere between 2018 and 2024, many people began treating their own personality like a public page that always needs edits. No wonder so many people feel tired in ways sleep does not fix. Think about how subtle this gets. A woman in Atlanta starts speaking more softly at work because directness once got called difficult. A man in Phoenix posts gym photos after a breakup, not because he loves fitness, but because he wants one specific person to see that he is doing better. A college student at UCLA joins clubs, updates her profile, and learns how to sound impressive in emails, yet still feels strangely absent from her own life. From the outside, that can look like ambition. From the inside, it can feel like drift. And this is why so much self-doubt is misread. People often think the pain comes from not being good enough. Sometimes it does. But often it comes from trying to stabilize a reflection that keeps changing depending on who is looking. You are quiet, and one room rewards it. You are quiet in another room, and it punishes you. You are warm, and one person feels safe with you. Another person calls you too much. If your worth rises and falls with all of those reactions, peace becomes almost impossible. Now, bring Leon Festinger into the room. In 1954, he wrote about social comparison, the habit of understanding ourselves by lining our lives up against other people's lives. That habit is old. The speed is new. You open your phone in 2025, and before breakfast you have already measured yourself against a founder in Austin, a creator in Los Angeles, a couple in Nashville, and a stranger on Instagram Reels who somehow looks clear, loved, fit, and unbothered all at once. It does something to your mind, because comparison almost always hides the price tag. You see the promotion, not the panic attacks. You see the engagement photos, not the 3 years of confusion before them. You see the calm voice on a podcast, not the editing, coaching, retakes, and fear behind it. You see one clean square on a screen and compare it to the messiest hour in your own head. That is not a fair contest. It never was. And yet people make major decisions from that feeling every day. They leave rooms too quickly because they think they are behind. They stay in rooms too long because they think being chosen by the right crowd will finally settle something inside them. They become easier, louder, cooler, sharper, less emotional, more agreeable, more polished. Not because those changes are honest, because they seem rewarded. This is why visibility, likability, and actual worth get mixed together so easily in American life right now. Visibility means people notice you. Likability means people respond well to you. Worth is something deeper. Those three can overlap. They often don't. The person getting all the attention on TikTok may be deeply lost. The quiet woman in Seattle who barely posts may be living with more clarity than anyone in the room. The man everyone depends on at the office may still go home feeling replaceable. And the one who seems behind at 31 may simply be refusing a race that was never designed with his soul in mind. That changes the conversation.
Because then the question is no longer, how do I become more impressive? It becomes, who handed me these numbers in the first place? Who taught me that being visible means being valuable? Who taught me that being easy to read means being safe to love? Who taught me that if somebody misreads me, I must immediately correct the record? You do not need to win every misreading. You do not need to outshine every rival. You do not need to chase every room that rewards the loudest signal. Sometimes the deepest relief begins when you stop treating every reflection like a report card. You are not weak because the noise got into your head. In America in the 2020s, the noise was built to get into your head. The feeds are fast, the judgments are cheap, the images are edited, the profiles are trimmed, the reactions are public. Of course, people start to confuse exposure with value. So if you have been feeling smaller lately, slower lately, easier to overlook lately, do not rush to call that the truth about you. It may only be the result of standing too long in the wrong mirrors. Some people do not miss the person as much as they miss the verdict. That is why a breakup can keep hurting long after the love is gone. It is why a cold text sent at 11:48 p.m. can stay in your chest for months. It is why being left on red, getting blocked on Instagram, or seeing divorce papers filed in Harris County can feel bigger than the event itself. You are not only losing someone, you are standing inside a sentence you never agreed to. For a lot of people, the pain is not just they left. The pain is, what did their leaving say about me? And once that question gets in, the mind gets busy. Not peaceful, busy. It starts building arguments. It starts collecting evidence. It starts trying to win a case that no court ever opened. You can see it everywhere. A woman in Phoenix keeps rewriting the message she never sends.
A man in Brooklyn starts posting harder, dressing sharper, working later, because one person walked away and he wants the ending revised. A senior at UCLA gets denied, not by love this time, but by the school he dreamed about since 2019. And suddenly the rejection feels personal in a way the email never had the right to be. That is where many people get confused. They tell themselves they still care deeply about the person. Sometimes they do. But sometimes they care even more about the injury to their place in the story. The bond ended, and now the mind wants to reopen the file and say, "You read me wrong. You left too early. You did not see my worth clearly enough." And that urge usually comes in three forms. The first is the urge to explain. You want one more conversation, one more phone call, one more clear, mature, perfectly worded message. In your head, it sounds noble, but often it is not about honesty. It is about trying to erase the version of you that got dismissed. That is why a breakup text from April can still have you pacing in October. You are not only searching for closure, you are trying to appeal a ruling. The second is the urge to prove. Promotions, new clothes, better shape, new apartment, a cleaner life. In Los Angeles, Miami, and Dallas, people do this every day and call it growth. Sometimes it is growth. Sometimes it is grief wearing cologne. The raise, the six-pack, the calm new photos, the doing amazing energy. None of it feels like enough if one specific person still exists in your mind as the audience. The third is the urge to rehearse. This one is quieter. You imagine bumping into them at Whole Foods in Austin. You picture them seeing your name on LinkedIn. You hear the line you would say if they ever came back.
You replay the dinner in Manhattan where they seemed distant. You rewrite the silence in your car outside their apartment in 2022. Scene after scene. In every version, you finally look undeniable. Pause for a second.
If any of this feels familiar, it does not mean you are weak. It means your pride got pulled into your heartbreak, and now the two are tangled together. In 2023, relationship content on TikTok exploded for a reason. Millions of people were not just trying to get over someone. They were trying to make sense of why being left felt like being reduced. And here is the hard part. The more your dignity depends on the person who rejected you, the longer they stay in charge, even in absence. They do not have to text. They do not have to explain. They do not have to come back. If your value still rises and falls with their opinion, they remain on the bench, and you remain in the witness chair. So ask yourself something very simple. Do you miss them? Or do you miss the version of yourself that never got dismissed? Because those are not the same loss. One is about connection. The other is about self-respect. One asks, how do I grieve this? The other asks, how do I live with the idea that someone saw me and still walked away? That second question is often the one keeping people awake at 2:13 a.m. It is behind the overthinking, the checking, the imagined speeches, and the sudden need to become extraordinary. This is also why rejection in other areas can hit with the same force. A layoff email from Meta in 2023. We went with another candidate call after a final interview in Seattle. A friend group in Nashville that slowly stops inviting you. A college denial letter. A partner who says, I just don't feel the same anymore. Different settings, same wound. But there is a way out, and it starts in a place most people avoid. You have to stop calling every unfinished feeling love. Some unfinished feelings are sorrow. Some are shock. Some are wounded ego. Some are the ache of not being chosen. And some are plain old disbelief that somebody else got to decide without your permission. Once you can name that honestly, something opens.
You stop trying to be understood by the one who already left. You stop treating their exit like sacred truth. You stop making one person's decision the final word on your character. Their leaving may have changed your life. It did not gain the right to define your worth. That is where real peace begins. Not when they regret it, not when you finally look untouchable, not when the perfect reply comes to you in the shower 6 months too late. Peace begins when you step out of the courtroom altogether for good. A lot of people think honesty means speed. They think if the feeling is real, it should come out right away. In a text argument at 12:07 a.m., in a Slack conflict on a Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of a Thanksgiving dinner when everyone is already tense, they assume the purest thing to do is to say exactly what they feel the moment they feel it. That sounds brave. It can also be careless. Because not every raw feeling is ready to speak. The word authentic gets used so loosely now that it almost means nothing. On TikTok in 2024, people praised being real while filming themselves mid-breakdown. In offices from New York to San Francisco, people started calling bluntness transparency, even when it left damage behind. And in relationships, plenty of people began treating emotional release as proof of depth. But saying the first thing that rises in you is not always honesty. Sometimes it is simply unprocessed pain with good marketing. That matters. Because when people confuse truth with urgency, they create chaos and call it self-expression. They send the long paragraph. They bring up 5 old wounds in one breath. They say, "I'm just being honest," when the real sentence should be, "I haven't sat with this long enough to know what I'm actually trying to say." That is not the same thing. Daniel Goleman helped make this easier to understand back in 1995 when he wrote about emotional intelligence. His point was not that feelings are the enemy.
His point was that feelings carry information, and information becomes useful only when you know what you are holding. Anger may be grief. Jealousy may be fear. Distance may be shame. If you name the feeling wrong, you speak from the wrong place. And once that happens, even a sincere conversation can go off course. You can watch this play out in ordinary life. A manager in Seattle gets critical feedback in a performance review and says, "This is unfair," because that is what hits first. 2 hours later, after the drive home, the real feeling appears: embarrassment. A woman in Atlanta sees a short reply from her partner and fires back a paragraph about disrespect when what she really feels is panic. A son at a Thanksgiving table in Ohio explodes over one sarcastic comment from his father, but the heat in his voice was not born that night. It had been waiting for years. This is where people get trapped. They think their first reaction is their truest self. It often is not. It is just the fastest part of them. And the fastest part of you is not always the wisest part of you. Carl Rogers, writing in the 1960s, argued that real congruence matters, that your inner life and outer life should not live at war with each other. But congruence does not mean blurting. It does not mean handing your untouched emotion to the room and asking everyone else to sort it out. It means not pretending to feel something you do not, and not pretending not to feel something you do. There is a difference. One person says, "I need a minute. I'm more hurt than I thought." Another says, "You always do this. You never care. I'm done." Both are emotional. Only one is clear. The first person has stayed with the feeling long enough to recognize it. The second person is still inside the blast. From the outside, the second voice may look more passionate. It may even look more real. In practice, it is often less accurate. That is why some conversations leave you lighter, and others leave you ashamed. Not because you are honest in one and dishonest in the other, because in one, you knew what you were carrying. In the other, you just threw it. So here is a better way to think about it. There is the feeling as it first rises. There is the feeling after you have named it correctly. And there is the version of that feeling you can actually bring into speech without making someone else pay for your confusion. Those are not the same stage of the journey. And when people rush past the middle, their truth comes out jagged. Look at how different this becomes in real situations. In a therapy session in Boston, a client says, "I'm angry at my sister." After 10 minutes, the sentence changes to, "I'm angry because I still keep hoping she'll become someone she has never been." That second sentence has weight. It has shape. It has grief inside it, not just fire. In a workplace channel on Slack, an employee types, "This makes no sense," deletes it, waits, and then writes, "I'm confused about the priority here because the deadline changed twice this week." Same frustration, different delivery. One burns trust, the other builds it. In a relationship, the difference can be even more dramatic. One text says, "Forget it, do whatever you want." Another says, "When you went quiet last night, I felt myself getting scared, and I handled that badly." Both came from pain. Only one gives the other person a chance to meet something real. This is why calm speech is so often misunderstood. People hear restraint and assume repression. They hear pauses and assume fear. They hear a soft tone and assume weakness. But often the opposite is true. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who can feel everything and still choose the right sentence.
James Gross at Stanford has spent years studying emotion regulation, and one of the clearest takeaways from that work is simple. The timing of how you handle emotion changes the outcome. When people notice what is happening early, name it early, and respond with awareness, the damage is usually smaller. When they wait until the feeling has flooded the body, the words tend to come out harsher, broader, and less precise. That explains a lot of broken moments. It explains why one dinner turns into a family war over a joke that should have stayed small. It explains why one message thread becomes a breakup by midnight. It explains why somebody can walk out of a meeting feeling righteous at 3 p.m. and deeply embarrassed by 7:40 p.m. And here is the part that really matters. You do not become fake when you slow down. You become more accurate. You do not betray your heart by choosing the right time. You protect what your heart is actually trying to say. That changes how you move through almost every part of life in America right now. Online, it means you do not owe the internet your first reaction. On Instagram Stories or TikTok Live, the pressure to answer fast can make people mistake instant visibility for courage. At work, it means you do not have to turn every frustration into a live performance of confidence. In love, it means you do not need to speak from the rawest second to prove you care. And at home, especially around a family table in November, it means silence for a few minutes can be more truthful than 100 emotional words said too soon. That does not make you colder. It makes you cleaner. And clean truth lands differently. It does not spill all over the room. It reaches the person it was meant to reach. So the next time you feel that heat rising, the tight chest, the faster voice, the urge to say something sharp just to prove you are not small, pause before you call that honesty. Ask a simpler question first.
Is this the feeling itself speaking? Or is this a wound trying to talk before it has even learned its own name? Because the people who seem the most grounded are not the ones who feel less. They are the ones who stay with a feeling long enough to tell the truth without handing over the mess. Some people do not love you. They love how easy you are to keep. That is a hard sentence, but for a lot of people, it is also a freeing one. Because the moment you stop answering every late-night call, stop smoothing over every awkward silence, stop saying yes when your whole body means no, something strange happens. People who seemed comfortable with you suddenly become uncomfortable. The friend in the family group chat goes quiet. The co-parent who used to rely on your flexibility starts calling you difficult. The church friend in Tennessee who praised your kindness now says you've changed. And the first reaction in your chest is usually the same. Maybe I did. Not so fast. A lot of advice about self-respect sounds good until it touches real life. It sounds clean on paper. Speak clearly, stop over-explaining, protect your peace. But once those words leave a video and enter an actual Tuesday afternoon, they get tested by people who were used to the older version of you. The one who always drove, the one who always folded, the one who always made the holidays smooth. And that is where many people panic. Because they expected peace, they got pushback. Murray Bowen spent years studying family life, and one of the clearest things he saw was that people grow attached to the role you play, not just the person you are. If you have been the agreeable daughter in Atlanta, the steady brother in Dallas, the flexible ex in a co-parenting schedule outside Phoenix, your change does not land as a small update. It lands like a disruption.
Not because your new choice is cruel, because your old role made other people comfortable. You can watch this happen in ordinary American life all the time. A woman in Chicago stops being the unpaid emotional manager of every holiday dinner. By Thanksgiving, 2 relatives call her distant. A man in Los Angeles tells his ex-wife that pickup time for their son will stay exactly at 6 p.m., not whenever works. She says he has become cold. A younger sister in North Carolina says she cannot keep covering weekend care for their father every Saturday. And suddenly, the family text thread fills with words like selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. Same person, different behavior. New accusations. Harriet Lerner wrote about this for years. She noticed that when one person becomes clearer, the people around them often get louder before they get wiser. That is not proof that the clearer person is wrong. It is often proof that the old arrangement no longer works the way it used to. And old arrangements can be very profitable. The friend who always needed immediate reassurance. The sibling who always assumed you would step in. The parent who depended on your silence to avoid accountability. The partner who counted on your fear of conflict. Once you stop serving those habits, they do not usually clap for you. They react. Sometimes with guilt, sometimes with anger, sometimes with sadness that sounds noble, but is really just discomfort. This is why so many people confuse being disliked with being wrong. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General's report on loneliness reminded people how deeply connection shapes health and emotion. That matters here because when tension rises, the fear underneath is not just they're upset. It is often, I might lose my place. And human beings will do almost anything to avoid that feeling. They will over-explain. They will retreat. They will laugh off their own needs. They will call surrender maturity just to keep the room from turning cold. That is not peace. That is self-erasure with good manners. Now, bring that closer to home.
Family is usually where this gets hardest. Not because family pain hurts more, in theory, because it is older. It has roots. At work, people met you at 28 or 34 or 41. In a family, people met you when you were 6, maybe younger. They remember you as the peacemaker, the easy one, the strong one, the one who could handle it, the one who would never leave the table. So when you finally speak differently at a Christmas dinner in Ohio, or step away from a weekly church obligation in Georgia, they do not hear only the present moment. They hear a break in the role they had assigned to you years ago. That is why one sentence can cause so much heat. I can't host this year. I'm not available every weekend. That joke was not okay. I'm not discussing my divorce in front of the kids. No. Simple words. Heavy fallout. Salvador Minuchin, who spent years working with families, understood something most people only feel. When one person changes position, the whole family feels it. That does not make the change wrong. It just means the pressure around it is real. A mother who always expected instant access may suddenly call you disrespectful. A brother who counted on your free labor may say you are acting brand new. A co-parent who benefited from your guilt may start using the child as a mirror for your shame. That is why this part matters so much. You need to know ahead of time that a strong reaction is not the same thing as a true accusation. Read that again. A strong reaction is not the same thing as a true accusation. Plenty of people have cried when they lost control of someone. Plenty of people have called another person selfish when what they really meant was,
I miss how available you used to be to me. Plenty of people have used family language, love, duty, loyalty, respect, to keep old arrangements alive long after those arrangements became harmful.
In Pew's 2023 research on family and social life, Americans still described family as central to meaning and support. That is beautiful. It is also why guilt can get so strong. If family means everything, then upsetting family can feel like a moral failure even when it is simply an overdue correction. Sit with that. A lot of adult pain does not come from making the wrong move. It comes from making the right move and then being unable to survive the emotional weather that follows. The slammed cabinet, the icy text, the sister who says, "You used to care," the pastor who says, "This isn't who you are," the ex who says, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." The family group chat that goes silent for 2 days after one honest message. That silence can shake people. It can make them run backward fast. And that is why so many people return to the old script, not because they believe in it, because the new one costs more at first. But hear me clearly. The first cost of self-respect is often misunderstanding. Not clarity, not applause, misunderstanding. Later, if you stay steady, better things can grow from that. Cleaner relationships, fewer hidden resentments, less fear, more honesty, sometimes even more love. But in the beginning, it can look messy. It can look lonely. It can look like things are getting worse when they are actually getting more truthful. So if people have been reacting to your changes lately, do not rush to turn their discomfort into a verdict on your character. The people who benefited most from your old availability are usually the least excited about your new clarity. That does not automatically make them evil. It does not automatically make you right in every moment either. It just means this. When your life starts becoming less convenient for the people around you, some of them will call that betrayal before they ever call it growth. And if you do not know that ahead of time, you will keep mistaking pressure for wisdom. Not every closed face is truth. Not every disappointed voice is moral authority. Not every family upset is your fault. Sometimes it is just the sound old expectations make when they stop being fed. A lot of people call it confidence. It isn't, not at first. Confidence still asks, "How am I doing?" It still checks the room. It still watches faces. The deeper thing comes later. It begins when you stop asking every room, every ex, every parent, every app, every old version of your life to hand you a verdict. And that changes more than people realize. By now, you can probably see the pressure from 4 directions at once. Charles Horton Cooley showed how easily a person can start living inside imagined judgment back in 1902. Leon Festinger showed in 1954 how quickly comparison distorts self-worth. The breakup you thought was only heartbreak turned into a private trial. The family pushback you thought proved you were wrong may have only meant the old order was losing its grip. Put all of that together, and a person can feel exhausted without knowing why. That exhaustion has a cost. It shows up at work when one comment in a performance review can ruin an otherwise good week. It shows up in dating when one unread message on Hinge or one short reply at 10:43 p.m. suddenly feels like a statement about your value. It shows up in family life when one tense Sunday lunch or one holiday argument in Ohio makes you question yourself for days. And it shows up online when Instagram, TikTok, or LinkedIn quietly teaches you to watch your life as if you are always being graded. That is why this matters so much. Because a person can spend years trying to become more lovable, more chosen, more understandable, more impressive,
and still feel strangely unstable. Not because they are weak, because they are letting too many places vote on who they are. And if you let enough rooms vote on you, you will start changing shape just to survive the count. So here is the shift.
The goal is not to control every reflection. The goal is to stop negotiating with all of them. That is where real steadiness begins. Not when nobody misunderstands you, not when your family suddenly agrees, not when the person who left finally regrets it. It begins when you decide that misunderstanding, rejection, and discomfort can happen without becoming the final story of your life. There are 5 choices that can help you get there. The first is this: stop correcting every false reading of you. In 2024, a lot of people spent hours curating captions, polishing texts, editing tone, and smoothing their edges just to avoid being read the wrong way. Sometimes that care is useful. But if you are constantly revising yourself for people who have already decided who you are, you will disappear inside the edits. A coworker in Seattle may think you are distant because you stopped oversharing. A relative in Atlanta may call you selfish because you missed one gathering. That does not automatically require a defense. The second is this: stop trying to win your case with people who already left. That includes exes, former friends, bosses, and schools. It includes the person who blocked you on Instagram in 2022 and the job that rejected you in 2023. It includes the apartment you did not get, the city you did not move to, the person who said, "I just don't see it." You do not have to spend 5 more years building a life as evidence for somebody who already walked out of the room. The third is this: stop speaking from the very first flash of pain. Daniel Goleman wrote about emotional intelligence in 1995, but you do not need a textbook to feel the truth of it. The first wave is not always the clearest one. In a Slack thread, at a Thanksgiving table, in a late-night text fight, the fastest sentence is often the least faithful to what is really happening in you. A little delay is not betrayal. Sometimes it is the first act of honesty. The fourth is this: stop treating other people's reactions as moral proof. A hard face is not always a wise face. A hurt tone is not always a holy tone. A family member saying, "You've changed," is not always a warning. Sometimes it is only grief for the access they used to have to you. Harriet Lerner spent years writing about family life and emotional pressure, and one truth keeps returning. When one person becomes clearer, the people around them do not always become kinder first. The fifth is this: stop using crowded places as the judge of your worth. Social media rewards speed. Dating apps reward appeal. Workplaces often reward visibility. Churches and communities can reward compliance. Colleges reward certain kinds of polish. None of those places can tell the whole truth about a human being. A person can be deeply good and look unimpressive on LinkedIn. A person can be emotionally mature and still lose in a noisy room. A person can be growing in real ways and still look behind next to somebody else's highlight reel. Sit with that for a moment. A lot of your peace returns when you stop asking the wrong places to tell you who you are. Not because outside feedback never matters, because it does not deserve the final word. The U.S. Surgeon General's 2023 report on loneliness reminded people how deeply human beings need connection. That need is real. It is not weakness. But connection and surrender are not the same thing. Belonging and self-betrayal are not the same thing. Being loved and being easy to manage are not the same thing. And once you feel those differences in your own life, a lot of confusion starts to clear.
Now ask yourself 3 simple questions. Whose eyes have been deciding too much for you lately? Was it a parent in Dallas, a boss in New York, a partner who left, a church circle in Tennessee, or strangers on TikTok? Where are you still trying to prove a point that no longer needs proving?
And how often are you making choices from fear of being misunderstood rather than from calm knowledge of what is true? Stay there for a second. No rushing, no performance, just honesty. You may notice that some of your biggest struggles are not really about ambition, love, or discipline by themselves. They are about exposure to too many opinions, too many little verdicts, too many places where your value feels temporary. Pew's work in 2023 kept showing how deeply Americans still want belonging and meaning, and that is exactly why this part matters. The hunger to belong can quietly become the habit of self-erasure if you are not careful. But once you see it, you can start moving differently. You can walk into a meeting and not let one person's mood become your identity. You can receive a delayed text and not turn it into a prophecy. You can leave a family dinner and refuse to spend 4 days rewriting yourself in your head. You can hear disappointment without immediately translating it into guilt. You can let somebody misunderstand you and still sleep that night. That kind of steadiness does not look dramatic. It looks ordinary. It looks quiet. It looks like a person who no longer panics every time a mirror changes. And that is why it is so rare. Most people are still bargaining. They bargain with the past. They bargain with approval. They bargain with the room, the feed, the family table, the old lover, the future version of themselves. They keep offering little pieces of truth in exchange for a softer judgment. But there comes a point when you realize the trade is too expensive. Not because you stopped caring, because you finally started caring about the right thing. Your life. Your actual life. Not the edited one. Not the defended one. Not the one waiting for permission. So as you leave this video, do not carry out a slogan. Carry out a question. Where in your life are you still negotiating with a reflection that never had the authority to define you? Let that question stay with you. Take it into the next hard conversation. Take it into the next family gathering. Take it into the next quiet night when the old doubts try to return. Because sometimes the strongest proof that you are finally becoming more solid is very simple. You stop asking every passing face to tell you whether you are allowed to stand.